The galaxy had known humans for 300 years. In all that time, they had never started a war. They had never fired a weapon in anger. They built no warships, trained no soldiers, and kept no armies. The other species of the Galactic Compact looked at humanity and saw merchants, artists, doctors, and diplomats. They saw a gentle species that solved problems with words instead of weapons. They saw weakness. Admiral Park had served as Earth's cultural ambassador for 15 years. He was 58 years old with gray hair and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He spent his days organizing art exchanges and music festivals between human colonies and alien worlds. He spoke 7 languages and had never raised his voice in anger. The aliens who met him thought he was the perfect example of what humans were: soft, harmless, peaceful. They had no idea what he really was. Captain Lee commanded the merchant vessel Starlight Horizon. Her ship carried medical supplies to colonies across the neutral zones. She was 34 years old, calm under pressure, and beloved by her crew. When alien customs officers boarded her ship, they found bandages, medicine, and food. Nothing dangerous, nothing threatening, just another human helping others. On this particular day, was guiding her ship through the border region near space when her sensors detected something that made her blood run cold. Ships. Thousands of them. The largest armada she had ever seen, gathering just beyond the border like storm clouds before a hurricane. The Dominion controlled 200 star systems. They were warriors, conquerors, and they respected only strength. For decades, their war council had debated what to do about humanity. The humans had 47 colony worlds, rich in resources, positioned along valuable trade routes. They would be easy to take, almost too easy. High Commander stood before his war council, his scaled skin gleaming under the harsh lights. He was 9 feet tall, with claws that could tear through steel and teeth designed for ripping flesh. He had conquered 30 worlds in his lifetime. He had never lost a battle. "Our scouts have completed their survey of human space," he announced. "They found no warships, no orbital defenses, no weapons factories. The humans have nothing." One of his advisors spoke up. "They are protected by compact treaties. If we attack them, the other species might respond." Laughed, it was a horrible sound, like bones breaking. "The compact is weak. They talk and debate while we act. By the time they decide what to do, human space will already be ours." He pulled up images of human colonies on the display screen. Beautiful worlds with green forests and blue oceans. Cities full of millions of soft, helpless creatures who had forgotten how to fight. "Look at them," said with contempt. "They are herd animals wearing clothes. They will surrender the moment we arrive, and if they do not surrender, we will burn their worlds until they do." The War Council voted unanimously for invasion. Captain Lee watched the armada through her ship's sensors. Her hands were steady as she recorded everything. Ship numbers, fleet formations, weapon signatures. She had been trained to notice these things, though no one knew it. When she had enough data, she sent an encrypted message to Earth using a communication channel that officially did not exist. On Earth, Director received the warning. She was the head of the Human Diplomatic Corps, a soft-spoken woman of 60 who had spent her life preventing wars. She had brokered 17 peace treaties. She truly believed, that any conflict could be resolved through understanding and communication. She requested emergency diplomatic talks with She offered concessions, trade agreements, anything they wanted. She begged them to reconsider. High Commander received her message. He read it to his officers, and they laughed so hard that some of them could barely breathe. A human begging for mercy before the war had even begun. It was the funniest thing they had ever heard. Cut communications without responding. There was nothing to discuss. The invasion would proceed. Director sat alone in her office, staring at the blank screen. She had done everything she could. She had followed every protocol, tried every approach. None of it mattered. They did not want peace. They wanted conquest. She picked up her communicator and called a number she had hoped she would never need to call. A number known only to a handful of people in all of human space. Admiral Park was tending to his garden when he received the call. He listened without speaking. When the call ended, he set down his gardening tools and looked up at the sky. His kind eyes turned hard. The smile disappeared from his face. For a moment, he was not a diplomat or an ambassador. He was something else entirely. Something humanity had buried 300 years ago. He walked to his private shuttle and flew to the Swiss Alps. Deep beneath the mountains, hidden from all sensors and all eyes, was a vault that had not been opened in 3 centuries. The entrance was disguised as a collapsed mining tunnel. Even the Swiss government did not know it existed. Park placed his hand on a scanner that read his DNA, his fingerprints, and something deeper. Something in his blood that marked him as one of the keepers, the chosen few who remembered what humanity truly was. The vault doors began to open. They were 30 feet thick, made of alloys that did not officially exist. As they ground apart, cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of machine oil and sleeping power. Park stepped inside. The lights flickered on, revealing a cavern so vast he could not see the far end, and filling that cavern, row after row after row, were warships. Black as the void between stars, their hulls covered in weapons that the galaxy had never seen. 10,000 ships waiting in the darkness, waiting for this moment. Every screen in the facility flickered to life. A single word appeared, burning red against the black. Remember. Park walked to the central command console. Dust covered the controls, but they responded to his touch. Systems that had been dormant for 300 years began to wake. Power cores hummed. Weapon arrays calibrated. AI systems booted up, their first thoughts in centuries reaching out to connect with their long-sleeping crews. I remember, Park whispered. His voice was steady, but tears ran down his weathered cheeks. God help us all, I remember everything. Across human space, in hidden bases on moons and asteroids and the dark spaces between stars, other keepers received the same signal. They put down their civilian tools, their merchant manifests, their diplomatic papers. They walked to hidden vaults and placed their hands on ancient scanners. Humanity had shown the galaxy a mask for 300 years, a mask of peace, of gentleness, of harmlessness. The mask was about to come off. Colony was paradise. 8 million people lived on its green hills and beside its crystal lakes. Children played in parks while their parents worked in clean factories and research labs. The colony had been founded 200 years ago, and in all that time, it had never known war. The people awoke each morning to birdsong and went to sleep each night under peaceful stars. Governor Shin had led the colony for 12 years. She was 45 years old with a warm smile and a gift for making everyone feel heard. Under her leadership, had become one of the most prosperous colonies in human space. She had won 3 elections by promising to make even better. She had kept every promise. On the morning that came, she was having breakfast with her daughter. The first warning came at 6:47 a.m. Sensors detected ships entering the system, hundreds of ships, then thousands. Governor Shin rushed to the command center, her breakfast forgotten, her daughter crying behind her. She tried to contact the fleet. There was no response. She tried to contact Earth. They were jamming all communications. She tried to contact the ships themselves to ask what they wanted, to offer them whatever they needed if they would just stop. High Commander received her transmission. He watched the human woman begging on his screen, her eyes wide with fear, her voice shaking. He felt nothing but contempt. Begin bombardment, he ordered. The first plasma blast hit the capital city at 7:15 a.m. The explosion vaporized 10,000 people in an instant. Buildings that had stood for 2 centuries became dust and ash. The shockwave flattened everything within 5 kilometers. Governor Shin was thrown across the command center. When she got to her feet, half her staff was dead. The screens showed her city burning. Sirens screamed. People screamed louder. Send the surrender, she ordered. Send it on all channels. Tell them we give up. Tell them they can have anything they want. The surrender was broadcast to the fleet. Received it. He read it. Then he ordered the bombardment to continue. They do not deserve a quick conquest, he told his officers. They need to learn what happens to species that are weak. Burn everything. Sargent was 62 years old. He had been a peacekeeper in his younger days, trained to calm disputes and protect the innocent. He had not held a weapon in 20 years. His rifle was an antique that hung above his fireplace, a reminder of days he preferred not to think about. When the bombs started falling, he took the rifle down. His hands remembered how to load it even though his mind wanted to forget. He walked outside and saw the sky on fire. He saw buildings collapsing. He saw people running, screaming, dying. He knew his rifle was useless against orbital bombardment. He knew there was nothing he could do. But he had sworn an oath long ago to protect the innocent. So he stood in the street with his ancient weapon and helped people find shelter. He carried children whose parents were dead. He pulled wounded survivors from burning rubble. He could not fight the enemy in the sky, but he could do this. He could help the people in front of him. It was not enough. It would never be enough, but it was all he had. Dr. Sora was the chief medical officer of Central Hospital. When the attack began, she was performing surgery on a child with a broken arm. The hospital shook. The lights went out. The backup generators kicked in 3 seconds later, but those 3 seconds felt like 3 years. She finished the surgery. Then she organized the evacuation of the hospital. Patients who could walk helped patients who could not. Doctors and nurses carried supplies on their backs. They moved into the underground bunkers that every colony had but no one ever expected to use. The bunkers filled with survivors. Thousands of people crowded into spaces designed for hundreds. Sora treated burns and broken bones and crush injuries. She held the hands of people who were dying and told them they would be okay, even though everyone knew it was a lie. She also recorded everything. With her medical tablet, she captured the screams, the crying children, the desperate prayers. She recorded the mother who arrived carrying a child that was already dead but refused to let go. She recorded the old man who spent his last breaths telling his that he loved them. She did not know why she was recording. She just felt that someone needed to know. Someone needed to see what was happening. Someone needed to remember. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. When it finally stopped, colony no longer existed. The cities were craters. The forests were ash. The crystal lakes had boiled away, leaving nothing but scorched earth. Of the 8 million people who had woken up that morning in paradise, fewer than 50,000 survived in the bunkers beneath the ruins. Governor Shin was one of the survivors. She sat in the bunker covered in dust and blood and listened to reports from other colonies. The had struck everywhere at once. 3 human worlds had been attacked. Millions were dead. Millions more were dying. She tried again to contact Earth. This time the signal got through. Dr. Sora gave her recordings to the communications officer. "Send these," she said. "Send them to everyone. The whole galaxy needs to see what happened here." A single civilian transport had survived the attack. It was a small ship designed to carry cargo, not refugees. But they packed 2,000 survivors inside. Every seat was taken. People stood in the hallways, sat on the floors, squeezed into cargo holds. Sergeant was the last one to board. He looked back at the burning ruins of the only home he had ever known. Then he stepped inside and the doors closed behind him. The transport broke through the blockade. They let it go. Wanted survivors to spread the story. He wanted the other humans to know what was coming for them. The transport reached Earth 3 days later. Doctors' recordings were broadcast to every human world. Billions of people watched the destruction of colony. They saw the crying children. They heard the screaming. They watched their people die while begging for mercy that never came. Something changed in humanity that day. The tears stopped. The shock faded. What replaced them was silence. Cold, terrible silence. Admiral Park stood before the United Earth Council. The recordings played on the screens behind him. 8 million dead, 3 colonies destroyed, and they were coming for more. "They wanted to see what humans are capable of," Park said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. Permission to show them. The council did not debate. They did not discuss. They voted immediately, and the vote was unanimous. One word echoed through the halls of power. Awakening. Across human space, hidden doors began to open. Ancient machines began to wake. And the species that the galaxy thought was harmless prepared to remind the universe why their ancestors had buried their weapons in the first place. They had buried them because they were too terrible to use. But they had made them necessary again. Commander O had spent her entire life waiting for a day she hoped would never come. On paper, she was a merchant captain who transported luxury goods between star systems. In reality, she was something else entirely, something that officially did not exist. She was 39 years old. She had been selected at age 6, identified by genetic markers that traced back through her bloodline for centuries. Her parents had been told she was going to a special school for gifted children. They had not been told what the school really taught. For 33 years, had trained in secret. She had learned to command warships that she was never supposed to use. She had studied weapons that were supposed to stay buried forever. She had practiced tactics designed to fight wars that humanity had sworn it would never fight again. Every 5 years, she and the other shadow officers gathered in hidden facilities to run simulations. They kept their skills sharp. They maintained the sleeping fleet. and they prayed that they would never receive the activation order. The order came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Was asleep in her cabin aboard her merchant ship when her communicator buzzed. She looked at the screen and saw a string of numbers that made her heart stop. The code she had memorized as a child. The code that meant everything had changed. She got out of bed. She showered, dressed in her merchant clothes, and walked to the bridge. Her crew looked at her with curious eyes. They had no idea who she really was. "Set course for Lunar Station 7, she ordered. "Captain," her first officer asked, "we have a cargo delivery scheduled for." "Cancel it," set the course. 3 hours later, she walked through an airlock that scanned her DNA, her retinas, and the unique pattern of microchips embedded in her bones. The door opened into a corridor that led down, down, down into the heart of the moon. The hangar at the bottom was 5 kilometers long, and there, resting in its cradle like a sleeping giant, was the dreadnought Han River, had trained on this ship in simulations for 20 years. She had memorized every corridor, every system, every weapon, but she had never seen it in person until now. It was beautiful. It was terrible. It was a machine built for one purpose, to destroy anything that threatened humanity. Its hull was black, coated in materials that absorbed sensors and light alike. Its weapons bristled along every surface. It was 3 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to crack a planet in half. Walk to the bridge. Other shadow officers were arriving, taking their stations, powering up systems. The ship's AI awakened, its voice filling the bridge for the first time in 3 centuries. "Commander O, I have been waiting for you." "I hoped you would wait forever," said. "As did I, but we both knew this day might come." Engineer Nam was 67 years old. His official job was designing agricultural equipment. His real job was maintaining weapons that should never have existed. He stood in a facility buried beneath an asteroid, watching as technicians ran diagnostics on devices that made nuclear weapons look like toys. Quantum disruptors that could tear apart the bonds between atoms. Void torpedoes that created temporary black holes, swallowing anything nearby before collapsing. And the weapon he had hoped would rust away unused. There was a device that could destabilize stars. Point it at a sun, fire it, and within hours that sun would go supernova. Everything in the system would be sterilized. Planets, moons, stations, ships, everything would burn. Had built the 40 years ago, he had hoped it would never leave its vault. Now technicians were loading it onto a ship. Admiral Park arrived at the Central Command Facility to take charge of the operation. He had traded his civilian clothes for a uniform that had not been worn since humanity's dark days. Black fabric with silver trim. No medals, no decorations. Just a simple patch on the shoulder showing Earth wrapped in chains that had been broken. The symbol of the old human defense force. The military that humanity had dissolved after the Civil War, when they finally understood how dangerous they truly were. 10,000 warships were emerging from hidden bases across human space. Each one was crewed by officers who had trained in secret their entire lives. Each one carried weapons the galaxy had never imagined. They detected the fleet on their long-range sensors. At first, they thought their equipment was malfunctioning. Humans did not have warships. Everyone knew that. It was impossible. High Commander stared at the readings with growing disbelief. "Run the scan again." His officers ran it again, and again. The results did not change. 10,000 ships emerging from nowhere, forming into attack formations. "How?" whispered. "They have no military, they have no weapons. How is this possible?" No one had an answer. Admiral Park opened a communication channel to the High Command. His face appeared on every screen in the fleet, his expression calm, his eyes cold. 300 years ago, humanity fought a civil war, he said. We burned a dozen of our own worlds. We killed billions of our own people. We developed weapons so terrible that we horrified ourselves. When the war ended, we swore we would never fight again. We buried our weapons. We hid our ships. We showed the galaxy a peaceful face and hoped no one would ever make us take off the mask. He paused. Behind him, the lights of 10,000 warships filled the darkness of space. You killed 8 million people on colony. You bombed cities full of children. You ignored our surrender and kept burning. You thought we were weak. You thought we were harmless. You thought we had forgotten how to fight. Park leaned forward. His voice dropped to barely a whisper, but somehow it carried more weight than any shout. We never forgot. We just hoped we would never have to remember. He straightened. You wanted our worlds, come and take them. The transmission ended. Commander O looked at her tactical display. The fleet was massive, but they were scattered, spread out to occupy human space. They had expected no resistance. They had planned for conquest, not war. All ships, she ordered, plot course for the direct route. Her navigation officer looked up with shock. Commander, that route takes us through their entire defense network. Smiled, it was not a pleasant smile. I know, they should get a good look at what is coming for them. The Shadow Fleet moved as one, cutting through subspace like a knife through silk. Behind them, they left the burning ruins of Colony and the graves of 8 million innocent people. Ahead of them lay the heart of the Dominion, and the beginning of humanity's terrible answer. The first battle lasted 17 minutes. Forward Base Theta was a fortress. It had defended the border of the Dominion for 2 centuries. Its commander had 400 warships under his command and enough firepower to destroy a small moon. He had never lost a battle. He had never even come close to losing. When the human fleet appeared on his sensors, he laughed. Yes, there were many ships, but they were facing the might of the military. These soft creatures who had forgotten how to fight would learn a painful lesson. He ordered his fleet to attack. 17 minutes later, every ship was burning wreckage. The fortress station had been cracked open like an egg. The commander was dead, along with everyone who had served under him. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. Pilot was 26 years old. His grandmother had designed the fighter craft he flew. His mother had trained him in secret since he could walk. 3 generations of his family had prepared for this moment, hoping it would never come, preparing anyway. He led his squadron through the debris of the fleet, searching for survivors. There were none. The human weapons did not leave survivors. Quantum disruptors tore ships apart at the molecular level. One moment a vessel existed, the next moment it was expanding clouds of atoms. His wingman called, "I am detecting escape pods." Checked his sensors. Dozens of pods filled with soldiers who had abandoned their ships before the end. "Leave them," ordered. "We are not here to kill the helpless." "But Commander, they would not show us the same mercy." "I know, that is why we are better than them." The escape pods were collected by human support ships. The prisoners were treated with respect, given food and medical care, and held in comfortable facilities. Many of them could not understand why. They had expected torture, execution, the same cruelty they would have shown human prisoners. Instead, they received kindness. It confused them more than any weapon. Intelligence officer sat in a darkened room aboard the command ship, surrounded by screens showing data from across space. She was 43 years old, quiet, patient, and very good at her job. For 20 years, she had been planting spies and building networks inside the Dominion. Now all that preparation was paying off. She knew where every base was located. She knew their supply routes, their communication codes, their leadership structures. She had spent 2 decades preparing a map of everything that needed to function as an empire. Now she was using that map to take it all apart. Strike Team 7, target the fuel depot at coordinates 447B. Strike Team 12, disable the communication relay at Sector 9. Strike Team 23, eliminate the command bunker on the 3rd moon. Human forces hit dozens of targets simultaneously. Supply lines were cut. Communications went dark. Leadership bunkers exploded without warning. The military machine, which had conquered 200 worlds, began to fall apart. High Commander watched his empire crumble from his flagship above the. Every hour brought new reports of disaster. Bases destroyed, fleets annihilated, worlds falling silent. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "They are merchants, artists, diplomats. How are they destroying us?" His advisors had no answers. They had studied humanity for centuries and never suspected the truth. No one had suspected the truth. Ordered a counterattack. He gathered every ship he could find, 500 vessels crewed by the best officers in the Dominion. They would strike at the human fleet and turn the tide of the war. The counterattack lasted 8 minutes. Not a single ship survived. The humans did not even slow down. They kept advancing, taking world after world. Colonies that had stood for 1,000 years surrendered without firing a shot. They had heard what happened to those who resisted. 40 worlds fell in 10 days. The greatest military power in the sector was being dismantled like a child's toy. sent a desperate message to the Galactic Compact. He begged them to intervene. He called the humans aggressors, monsters, threats to galactic peace. He demanded that the other species unite against this new danger. The Compact received his message. They discussed it. Then they watched the recordings from Colony again. 8 million dead, cities burned while people begged for mercy, children screaming as bombs fell. The Compact declined to intervene. They had started this war. They would face the consequences alone. The human fleet reached on the 18th day. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the command ship, looking at the planet that had sent death to Colony. It was a beautiful world, covered in forests and oceans. 12 billion people lived on its surface. 12 billion lives that now depended on the choice of a single human. Park opened a channel to the planet. His face appeared on every screen across the... "High Commander," he said, "your empire is finished. Your fleets are destroyed. Your colonies have surrendered. You have one chance to save your and your people. Surrender unconditionally. Accept complete disarmament. Submit to human oversight of your government. Do this and your species will survive." He paused. His eyes were tired, heavy with a weight that no words could describe. "Refuse and there will be no second chance. You bombed our children while they begged for their lives. You showed no mercy. If you force us to destroy you, we will show no mercy either." Received the message. He stood in his command center, surrounded by advisors who were begging him to surrender. The war was lost. Everyone knew it. Pride was not worth extinction. But could not accept it. He could not believe that these soft, weak creatures had defeated the mighty. He could not surrender to animals. "They are bluffing," he declared. "They would not actually destroy us. They are too gentle, too civilized. They do not have the stomach for true warfare." He sent his response. A single word, an ancient term that roughly translated to a very crude insult. Admiral Park received the response. He closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, something had died inside them. "They thought we were harmless," he said quietly. "They thought we were soft. They thought we forgot how to be monsters." He turned to Engineer Nam, who stood beside the controls. The weapon was aimed at the sun, ready to end everything. "We never forgot. We just hoped we would never have to remember." Park looked at the peaceful planet on his screens. 12 billion people. Millions of children who had done nothing wrong. Families eating dinner, workers heading home, lovers watching the sunset. "Give them 6 hours to evacuate," Park ordered. "Then fire." His hands trembled. "Admiral, are you certain? Once we do this, we cannot take it back." Park's voice was empty. "They gave our children no time at all. 6 hours is more than they deserve." The evacuation order was broadcast. Ships fled in panic, cramming as many people as possible into any vessel that could fly. But 6 hours was not enough time. It could never be enough time. When the 6 hours ended, the fired. The sun began to die, though was gone. Not conquered, not occupied, gone, a void where a planet used to be. The had done its work and the star had torn itself apart, consuming everything in the system. 12 billion people who had not escaped in time were simply erased from existence. Admiral Park sat alone in his quarters for 3 days after the firing. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He stared at the wall and listened to the silence inside his own head. He had given the order. He had pushed the button. 2 billion civilians had died because of him. Children who had never hurt anyone. Families who had nothing to do with the war, gone because he had decided they should die. The evacuation ships had tried to flee. Park had ordered them shot down, every single one. He had watched them burn on his tactical display, tiny lights winking out one by one. "They gave our children the same mercy," he had said. Now, alone in the dark, he wondered if that made it right. He wondered if anything could ever make it right. The war was over. The remaining surrendered completely. Their empire was dissolved, their military dismantled forever, their leaders arrested and tried for war crimes. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was broken, reduced to a handful of colonies under human supervision. Humanity had won. The cost was everything they thought they were. Dr. Sora landed on a colony world 6 weeks after the war ended. She brought medical supplies, food, and a team of doctors. The civilians watched her with fear in their eyes. They expected punishment. They expected cruelty. They expected humans to treat them the way they had treated others. Instead, Sora set up a hospital and began treating patients. She did not ask if they were soldiers or civilians. She did not ask if they supported the war. She just helped anyone who needed help. A mother brought her sick child to the hospital. The child was dying from a disease that medicine could not cure. Sora worked through the night to save her. When morning came, the child was breathing easily, sleeping peacefully, recovering. The mother fell to her knees and wept. She did not understand. Humans had destroyed her. Humans had killed billions of her people. Why would they save her daughter? Sora knelt beside her. "We won the war," she said softly. "We do not have to be cruel anymore. We never wanted to be cruel in the first place." The Galactic Compact quietly revised their assessment of humanity. For 300 years, humans had been classified as non-threatening. A peaceful species, good for trade and diplomacy, not to be taken seriously as a military power. The new classification was different. Apex predator dormant, a species capable of extreme violence but choosing not to exercise it, a species that should never be provoked. Other species began treating humans differently, with more respect, with more caution, with a kind of fear that they tried very hard to hide. Admiral Park visited the memorial for Colony. It was a simple place, a wall of black stone with 8 million names carved into its surface. Each name was small, barely visible, but together they covered the wall from ground to sky. He found the section where the children's names were listed. So many children, so many futures erased before they could begin. He thought about the children he had killed in return, just as innocent, just as full of futures, just as dead. He took out a small knife and carved one more name at the bottom of the wall. His own name, not because he was dead, but because something inside him had died. The person he used to be, the gentle diplomat who believed in peace, was gone forever, burned away with the sun. Commander O adopted a child after the war. A little girl named IM, 8 years old, orphaned when Colony was destroyed. Had survived because her mother had hidden her in a storage compartment and covered her with blankets. Her mother had not survived. Did not speak for the first 3 months. She just watched everything with big, serious eyes that had seen too much. Slowly, with patience and love, helped her find her voice again. One night, asked the question that had been dreading. Why did we have to become monsters? Knelt down to the child's level. She looked into those serious eyes and told her the truth. So that no one ever thinks our children are easy prey again. Thought about this, but we killed their children too. Yes, we did. Does that make us bad? Was quiet for a long moment. I do not know, she finally said. I think it makes us dangerous, and I think sometimes dangerous is the only way to survive. The Shadow Fleet returned to its hidden bases. The weapons were locked away once more. The officers went back to their civilian lives, becoming merchants and teachers and farmers again. The mask of peace was put back on. But now the galaxy knew the truth. Behind the smile, behind the handshake, behind every human stood the shadow of what they were capable of. A elder, one of the few survivors of the evacuation, began teaching young a new lesson. He gathered them around him and spoke in a voice heavy with hard-earned wisdom. Do not wake the humans, let them smile, let them trade. Let them pretend they are gentle, do not test them, do not threaten them, do not touch their children or their worlds, because the alternative is extinction. We learned this. Never forget what it cost us to learn. On Earth, Admiral Park retired from service. He bought a small house in the mountains and planted a garden. Flowers and vegetables grew in neat rows above ground that hid the entrance to a weapons vault. He tended his garden every day, finding what peace he could in the simple work of helping things grow. Sometimes visitors came. Survivors of the war, officers who had served under him, politicians who wanted his advice. He received them politely and said very little. What was there to say? He had done what needed to be done. He would live with it until he died. There was no forgiveness possible because he would never forgive himself. One evening, as the sun set over his mountains, Park sat alone among his flowers. The sky was painted orange and red, beautiful colors that reminded him of plasma fire and burning worlds. Peace is not the absence of weapons, he whispered to no one. It is the choice not to use them. He looked up at the stars, those distant points of light where countless species lived their lives, built their civilizations, raised their children. Until someone takes that choice away. A butterfly landed on his hand. Delicate, gentle, harmless. He watched it flex its wings in the fading light. Somewhere out there, other species were telling their children stories about humans, warning them to be careful, teaching them to be respectful, showing them what happened to them when they thought humanity was weak. Park smiled, but there was no joy in it. The humans had shown the galaxy their true face, a face of terrible beauty and beautiful terror, a face that smiled kindly and killed without mercy, a face that the universe would never forget. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, 10,000 black warships waited in silence, ready for the next time someone thought humanity was harmless, ready to remind them of their mistake.